Well, it's had a cold, snowy day, so not much to do outside. Figured I might as well make another video about the Sniders. I think I'll split it into two parts. There's a few things I'd like to talk about in shooting these. And my last Snider video was wildly popular. I think I've had like 35 views, which usually I get only about 6. But yeah, so I got into the Snider. Oh, I'm going to say. I was trying to think of when I got my first one, and I think it was 1997. Pretty sure it was 1997, and I was still a teenager at that time, and it was before I had my what what's called the possession acquisition license. Now it was called an FAC back then, and I had originally been looking for a Martini Henry, and I phoned a gun shop, and that's back in the days before you could find things on the internet. I didn't have internet, so you had to phone, had to look in the yellow pages, or I think I was looking in Canadian Access to Firearms or something like that, and finding various gun shops, and I called some up, and I asked one of the guys, said, I'm looking for Martini Henrys, do you have any? He said, oh no, I don't have those, but I got a Snider. And I'd actually wanted the Snider more, but I never even thought that at the time that they were available. But so I ended up getting some details on it, and yeah, it was, I think, $350 or something. It wasn't very expensive, so I ended up buying that. And I had many, many more Sniders over the years. By that first one that I got was my primary shooter for a long time. And I had cadet carbines, I had a cavalry carbine, a short rifle, a sporting rifle, and various others over the years. Unfortunately, I had to sell all of the original Sniders and Martini Henrys that I had some years back to pay for my ex-wife's excesses. In hindsight, I probably should have sold my wife to the gypsies and then used the money to buy more Sniders, but live and learn. But anyhow, when I first started out, there was no, like, the internet was basically in its infancy at that time. There wasn't a lot on it, and I don't think there was probably anything about Sniders on there at the time. I couldn't really tell you though, because I didn't get the internet until long after that. But whatever the case, I was pretty much on my own. I had to shop around all over Canada with the yellow pages in order to find uh, reloading supplies. And at the time, the only thing that was available was the NDFS turned brass. And I think Elwood Epps was selling some at the time too, but I'm pretty sure that it was the same thing. It looked like exactly the same as the NDFS brass, except it had a different head stamp. It was stamped Epps. And unfortunately, I don't have any of that brass today. I sold it all with the last Snider that I sold many years ago. But nowadays, you have this stuff, which I haven't tried yet, but I have some of them to test. These are actually 24 gauge brass shotgun shells, and they're shortened to the proper length for the Snider. And I have some of these. I kept these from my original batch. These are old DC Company 57 Snider. They're a shorter case because the military case was a built up affair that had a separate rim, and then a base cup, and then another cup inside that, and the case walls made out of coiled brass and then paper and all sorts of things. So they didn't have a lot of internal volume, so they had to make them longer. Then Of course, the Dominion was just a plain drawn. I think these are actually a balloon head case too, so they just didn't need to be that long, so they made them shorter. And incidentally, a lot of times somebody will ask about these online. You'll see it in the forum or on Facebook or something. And almost every time somebody comes on there, oh, those are the cadet load, those were used with the cadet carbines. And no, they're not. The cadet carbine, there was no cadet load for the Snider to start with. And the cadet carbines were never intended to be fired. They just cut down long rifles into the cavalry carbine length to give them to the little cadets to drill. Now the cadets were quite young at that time, so they had the Ross 22 rifles and things like that for shooting, and those weren't very durable, so they wouldn't stand up to drill. But anyhow, when I first started, the only thing that was available was the turned brass, and all the rage at that time was there was a bullet mold for 590 solid bullet, no hollow base, so I bought that. And I think at the time I only had something like 10 pieces of brass because it was ridiculously expensive even then. And I put together some ammo. I used some lubricant made out of the experts of the day told me to use toilet ring gaskets, which were synthetic beeswax, mixed with Vaseline. And let's just say my first trip to the range was disappointing. And then I tried another expert told me to use synthetic motor oil mixed with beeswax, which was another bomb. And long story short, after playing with many witches' brews over the years, I finally settled on this stuff. This is what I make myself. This is mostly beeswax mixed with some canola oil, and it's stiff lube. But as soon as you put the heat of your finger on it, it starts to soften up and melt. And that's what you want. And you don't want, for black powder lube, you don't want anything that has anything to do with petroleum products in it, or synthetic stuff, which is, of course, petroleum-based as well, I guess. But any of that stuff, it's great for lubricant for smokeless loads, for like smokeless cast bullet loads, but it's absolute garbage for black powder because it kind of makes the black powder fouling go hard. Now this stuff, which I've been using for about 20 years, I've changed my recipe a few times. I started out using olive oil, which was ridiculously expensive, and I finally settled on using canola oil because it's the cheapest oil you can buy and seems to work just as well. So using this, cleanup was a breeze. It was really easy to clean up afterward. The fouling stayed soft. And eventually I had, I think I had 100 cases, and I never brought fewer than 80 to a black powder shoot because everybody always wanted to shoot the Snider. And you could fire all of the rounds that I brought to the range, and it would still shoot accurately at the end. I never had to swab the bore or anything. And at the end of the shoot, all of the fouling that was in the bore was basically in the form of black grease. And you could actually see the residue in front of if you're shooting prone. You could see that a lot of the fouling from previous shots was expelled with the next shot. And that's kind of what you want to aim for. Now, the modern solution to this, rather than just using the proper lubricant, I've seen it on the internet, and I mean no disrespect to the people that are doing this, but that it's a stupid idea. What they're doing is dipping they have this, it's some kind of cream for cow udders. I can't remember what it's called, but they actually take the cartridge and they dip it into this goop, and then they chamber the round and fire it. And you can see in the pictures there that, like in the videos, you can see the gun is covered with this stuff. I mean, there's the Snider doesn't have any bottleneck really to speak of. So anything that you put on the bullet and then run that into the chamber is going to get all over the entire cartridge. It's going to get all over the chamber walls. And when you fire your cartridge, the brass expands in the chamber, so that takes a lot of the pressure off of your breech block. So, like, ideally when you're shooting, you want your chamber to be completely dry, like free of any oil whatsoever, so that the brass expands against the chamber. And you can see too, like, this is a huge surface area, so that's going to take a lot of the pressure of the firing. And putting this goop on there and getting it all over the chamber, your case is basically going to be floating on a film of that lube. Some machine guns that operated on a blowback principle actually had, I think there was an Italian machine gun, and I think it was an Austro-Hungarian one as well. They actually had an oil pump that would lubricate the cartridges as they went in, because with high pressure cartridges there, they wanted it floating on a film of oil so that it had sufficient rearward thrust to operate the action. So in that case, the firearm was designed around that, so it needed the film of oil for the cartridge to float on. Otherwise, the thing would probably end up ripping the case apart. But that's not what you're looking for with a Snider. I mean, you're dealing with, in the case of this one, I think this one, the action would be from 1866. This one would be from 1872. So, you're looking at 150 years and up for... you don't really want to be playing around with things that old. It's you're especially particularly with the Mark III. Like, the Mark III doesn't have a lot of meat in the back of the breech block compared to the earlier Marks. And this is another thing I'd like to touch on too, that I quite often read online, that the Mark III is the one to have because it's a stronger action. It's not stronger at all. It has what they call the positive lock, but you can see how much they've taken out of the back there to accommodate that lock, and also to accommodate the plunger in the breech block. This hole goes back to about here, and that's taken a lot of the meat out of that, so you don't have the surface area on the back here for the breech block to bear on. And the more battering you take, this particular rifle had suffered from that. The previous owner had shot it a lot with smokeless powder loads, and what had happened with that is the smokeless powder loads had battered the back of the breech block to the point where the little locking plunger was stuck. I couldn't even get the action open when I first received this one, and I had to tap this with a rubber mallet until it went in. And of course the locking plunger was stuck inside the breech block, and it pretty much took a whole morning of work on that to get it to work. So the reason for the Mark III wasn't to add strength to the action. It was because the original cases were not very good, and quite often they would blow apart, and you would end up with a burst of gas would come out, and then of course it would get under the breech block, and with no lock it would flip it open, and then a part of the case would fly back and hit the shooter on the forehead. I don't think anyone was actually seriously injured by that, but it was disconcerting. But you can actually see the deformation in the breech block on this, and you'll see this quite often on Sniders, particularly on the Mark III after they've been shot a lot with smokeless powder. So that's one thing that I've never done. It's stupid to shoot these with smokeless powder. There's no reason to do so. It takes away, anytime you're using something like that, it takes away the fun of shooting them anyway. And there's just no reason to do it. I mean, if you're going to go to the trouble of firing one of these things, you may as well do it right. And that's one reason I like Rob from British Muzzleloaders' videos there. He actually shoots from field positions and uses real black powder, and lots of people, you see them shooting these, they're sitting on a bench and they're going plop at this basically silent round. Oh, look, I'm shooting my Snider. You're not really shooting it at that point, you're just basically playing with the thing. But whatever. When I first started out with these solid-based bullets, I think I've gotten way off track here, but I had problems with I finally got them to shoot accurately, and then the accuracy just went away and wasn't coming back. And right at the mouth of the chamber, right around here somewhere, I noticed there was a rough spot that I kept feeling when I was cleaning. And so I worked at it. I can't remember if I actually got it out with a patch or if I ended up getting I think I may have put a 20 gauge shotgun brush down it to try to dislodge what was in there. I think that's how I got it out. But it was actually a thing that looked like a washer. The throat in Snider's is really abrupt. It's basically like a 45-degree angle, and that was actually cutting the lead off of the bullets. And over time, it was I noticed it was getting somewhat hard to chamber around, and that's why. So, you can just imagine, like, that was creating a huge pressure spike because the bullet was trying to leave the case and hitting this lead washer. And yeah, it's actually kind of scary to think about that was building up in there for some time. I think it built up over there over like the period of about 200 rounds. But because of that, and now the trend now, like again, not to knock the people that are using these or anything, but the trend now is a 600 cast bullet. And yeah, I was having problems with the 590. So, and not all Sniders are created equal either. A lot of them have a lot tighter bores than others. Some of them have a really loose bore. So, a long time ago, I settled on using these regular hollow base bullets, and I had really good results with them. I had great accuracy. We were able to, with ease at the black powder shoots, we were able to hit frozen. Like they would take the 1 liter skinny milk containers, and the guys would take them home and freeze them, and then they would bring those to the chute and set up the ice things at 100 yards. And the Snider would consistently whack those off, and I think it was actually the only gun at the black powder shoots that was consistently hitting the things at 100 yards. And it would also consistently hit the gong at 200 meters. So the only thing that I can think of that I did that seems to be different was that I found early on that the soft bullets weren't successful, so I tried hardening them with tin. And the hardened, like, this goes against everything. They say that these will not work reliably unless they're made out of 100% pure lead. And I found that making them out of the harder lead greatly increased the accuracy. And like I said, they would consistently shoot these into the 100-yard gong, which wasn't really, or the 200-yard gong, which wasn't very big. It was actually 200 meters. I think we measured it. I think it was 236 yards, and it shot great. And I read online how people talk that they use these bullets. They load them up in these cases and just use them to fire for them, so they can fire the 600 bullets out of them. And almost everyone who shoots them seems to report that they can't even keep them on the paper at 50 yards. So I don't understand what the problem is. That maybe if I were to guess, I would say maybe the lube. And I tried these as well. These don't have a very deep hollow base. These were garbage. They were no good at all. So I wouldn't recommend those at all. So I bought a different base plug for the Lee mold as well that has a deeper plug. It's a deeper plug for the existing Lee mold, so it puts the cavity almost right through the bullet. I'm going to try those out and see how they do. It's often said that the Snider was inaccurate because they went through 9 marks of ammunition in, I think, 3 or 4 years or whatever. And that isn't really the case. It is true that they went through 9 marks of ammunition, but it wasn't because the Snider was inaccurate. The problem was that the short rifles had a 5 groove with 1 in 48 twist rifling, and the 3-band Snider that the infantry used, I believe, was some people say it's 1 in 72, some say it's 1 in 78. I'm pretty sure it's 1 in 72 though, and 3 groove rifling, and it's also tapered so that they're larger at the breech than they are at the muzzle. But whatever the case, what would happen, they would make 1 mark of ammunition and it would shoot great in the 3-band rifle. And these, what they call the sergeant's rifle, were supposed to be more of a precision arm, and they weren't shooting worth beans. So then they would come out with a new mark of ammunition that shot great in the sergeant's rifle but didn't shoot in the 3-band. And that went back and forth until I think the Mark 9 was supposed to be the perfected one, and it gave acceptable accuracy in both. But I didn't shoot a short rifle extensively when I had them before, so I don't know how the short rifle will handle these bullets. That's why I ordered the different base plug for. Well, if these don't work, I'll try the different base plug. And what I did do different things with these too. I would make base plugs for these out of toilet paper. You would take the toilet paper and just take 1 square of it, soak it, and then squish it into the base of the bullet and then let it dry. And it would make a nice hard base plug to help the bullet expand. And I did recover some of the bullets from the backstop at the range, and from what I could see, they were engaging the rifling really well, and the base plugs were working. And I also just packed the base of the bullet full of lubricant, and that seemed to work just as well. And the other bullet that I used was by Rapine. I don't have the mold for it anymore, unfortunately, but it was called a trash can. I think that was a 585 hollow base wad cutter, and that shot really well in the Sniders, but and it shot well out to 200 meters as well, but the only problem with it was that the trajectory was so high that you had to have the sight set at 400 to impact the 200 meter gong. But at 100 meters, it was really good. And I'm going to see if I can get one of those molds again now that I have Sniders to shoot. But yeah, so I'm kind of excited to try these out and see what kind of results I'll get. One thing I did do when I first started loading them, I tried toilet paper as a filler, cotton balls. Both of those were a disaster because they would come out of the muzzle on fire. And even though I live on the west coast in a rainforest, it gets pretty dry in the summertime, and I didn't want to be responsible for starting a forest fire. So somebody advised me to use cornmeal, and I used cornmeal for a little bit, and then I noticed when I was cleaning it that I would actually have sugar crystals formed inside the bore. And I didn't think that was a very good thing, because anything that takes a crystal form could probably be somewhat abrasive. So I switched to cream of wheat, and cream of wheat seems to be completely inert. It doesn't even burn very well. Most of it would just be expelled out of the case. So the cream of wheat was definitely the way to go for filler. But I'm wondering how these are going to work out, because these are going to take a lot of filler. I should note too that I always used the service charge. I used 72 grains of single FG and then the filler, and I never used Magnum primers or anything. I just used regular large rifle primers. These cases unfortunately don't take rifle primers, they take large pistol primers for some reason. That's kind of an odd thing, and I somewhat concerned about that. I may have to shorten the firing pin because the hammer on the Snider comes down like the crack of doom, and I am somewhat concerned that the pistol primers may be a little bit soft, and the firing pin may end up puncturing them. But we'll have to see, I guess. But anyhow, I guess that's it for now. I'll make another video later for you. I want to detail how I used to clean these and maintain them when I shot them a lot. And hopefully sometime in the summertime, when the weather improves and everything, we can make a trip out to the outdoors and actually do some shooting and see what these things will do. I can't wait to try them out, actually.